I'm sitting in the empty reception ballroom, 2 hours after the wedding rehearsal ended, watching a single tea light candle burn itself out. There's still glitter from the table decor stuck to my forearm. You can't see it, but you can feel it. And that's how I feel tonight. Like something that sparkles, but only if the light hits it correctly. My name is Clara Wells. I'm 29 years old. I work as an entry-level data analyst for a commercial analytics firm in downtown Chicago. On weekends, I do part-time photo retouching, color grading, skin texture repair, subtle shape correction for lifestyle photographers who shoot social media brand campaigns. I don't tell many people about that second job. Not because I'm embarrassed, but because it's the one place in my life where I control the image. Which is probably the sick poetry of how this story begins, because tonight, my own family told me I wasn't aesthetic enough to stand in the photo. Before I continue my story, tell me this. Would you apologize for existing? Or would you let the truth develop in its own sharp clarity? She said I wasn't aesthetic enough to be a bridesmaid in her wedding. My own sister. And not in anger, not in jealousy, just in logistics, brand-aligned necessity. Harper didn't even say it herself. She sent her wedding planner to soften the phrasing. You understand, Clara, we need the family photos to look flawless. I remember blinking once. Just once. Because I knew I had to freeze the moment exactly as it happened with precision for later. I knew it was going to matter. I didn't react. I didn't cry. I just let the sentence fall into my chest like a stone dropped into a lake. Cold, direct, no splash. I didn't know whether to laugh, leave, or take notes. So I did the only thing I've always done when someone tries to rewrite my reality. I documented it. Voice memo. Immediately. Red light recording. Full phrasing captured. Just facts. Just timestamp. Just clean digital truth. I pressed save. And then, quietly, I smiled. Because that was the moment the story actually began. Not when they tried to reduce me, but when they forgot who I actually am. I don't wage revenge in chaos. I wage it in metadata. Here at Revenge Bible, we explore real psychological stories of betrayal and justice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss our next emotional reckoning. Growing up, my mother always talked about presentation. She didn't mean manners. She meant optics. She used to say it casually, the way some moms remind their kids to bring a cardigan. You never know who's looking, Clara. You never know who's connecting dots. The irony is, I became the one who actually, literally, connects dots for a living. I analyze patterns for commercial retail performance, brand user behavior, engagement conversion, color psychology. I know what a consumer sees before they consciously realize they've seen it. In our family, though, that skill didn't mean anything. Harper was the golden sibling because she was visually cinematic. Slender, blonde, editorial bone structure. Always center frame. Not because she earned it through intelligence or grit, but because people reacted to her the way advertisers want audiences to react. My mother didn't even hide it. Harper was her showpiece. I was supporting texture. She never said the phrase directly, but there are certain compliments that are actually just social decorum layered over preference hierarchy. My girls are so different. Clara is the smart one. Translation: Clara is the one we position backstage. And I accepted that dynamic for years. Not because I lacked self-regard, but because I didn't need to compete in a category I never signed up for. I wasn't trying to be the visual centerpiece. I just wanted to exist without being edited. That was my quiet boundary. Which is funny, because on weekends, I retouch other people's faces for money. But when I work behind a screen, I protect people subtly. I don't distort bone structure. I don't liquefy bodies. I don't bleach out pores or stretch silhouettes. I enhance lighting. That's all. I believe real humans deserve to look like humans. Harper believes humans are supposed to look like a curated software preset. That difference is the DNA of this story. Before the wedding conflict, we were civil. Not close, not traumatic, just two parallel lives in the same family ecosystem. I lived in a 600-square-foot apartment in Logan Square with Planf on my windowsill, 2 Dutch presses for small-batch coffee experiments, and one favorite wool blanket I got secondhand for $12 from a tiny thrift shop near Maplewood Avenue. My apartment never tried to impress anyone. It just offered me privacy from expectations. Some nights, I would sit at my desk, retouching brand images, while soft ambient piano played through my speakers. That was my sanctuary. Quiet, neutral, self-contained. Meanwhile, Harper lived suspended in the world of sponsored content, brand retreats, floral experiences, micro-influencer affiliate codes. Everything with her was directionally optimized for aesthetics. She didn't just post pictures, she arranged them like campaign assets. Wedding planning was the apex. She booked a premium event venue on the north side, industrial modern with warm Edison bulbs, imported Chilean eucalyptus table runners, and a $38,000 sponsorship deal she secured because her wedding was being pitched as the new blueprint for Chicago modern feminine bridal styling. Sponsors wanted sisterhood, smiling bridesmaids, perfect camera geometry, color grading that looked magazine-ready. Which is why I was supposed to be a bridesmaid. We had a dress fitting. I showed up. I took measurements. I checked color tones for consistency. Because even though I wasn't emotionally invested, I wasn't careless. I don't sabotage things that aren't mine. That's not my way. But days before the rehearsal, Harper's planner pulled me aside with that sentence that essentially demoted me out of frame. And as I sat there in the empty ballroom after it happened, before I recorded the voice memo, I kept thinking, I was never the problem. I never demanded the spotlight. I never asked to be the perfect sister. I simply expected to exist in my own family without being graded like a stock photo. The camera was never my enemy. It was their projection onto my body that created distortion. Sometimes people think betrayal is loud. Sometimes they think betrayal is violent. But in my family, betrayal was always polite, wrapped in etiquette, art-directed cruelty, neutral tones, softly lit, brand safe. And because it was subtle, it was easier for them to believe their actions were harmless. That's what makes psychological betrayal so dangerous. People convince themselves they're behaving reasonably while simultaneously erasing another person's basic personhood. So when that moment happened, that rehearsed micro-humiliation, I didn't feel shock. I felt verification. They finally said out loud what they'd always implied. I was only valuable if I enhanced Harper's image. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to keep accepting the frame they placed me in. I could make my own. I could control the narrative. With precision. With timestamps. With metadata. Not to destroy, but to balance the record. Not to punish, but to correct the record. And once that thought settled into my chest, the rest of the story became inevitable. I didn't spiral. I didn't flinch. I just moved differently. Because the moment betrayal becomes visible, you stop interacting emotionally and you start interacting observationally. And what happened next was not one moment. It was a sequence of micro-events, all part of the same architecture. The moment after the planner delivered the line, Harper acted like nothing had happened, like the fact that she had outsourced the humiliation insulated her from accountability. She came up to me later, that same evening, at the rehearsal dinner welcome mixer. She was glowing. Even if you muted the audio, her body language said, "Everything is about me." She tapped my arm gently, smiled at me in front of a small cluster of people, and said, "So I heard Meredith spoke to you. You good? I just need this night to feel cohesive, okay?" Cohesive. Not fair, not kind, not considerate. Cohesive. I nodded once. Accurate facial neutrality. This is where people misunderstand me. They think silence means weakness. They think quiet means subservience. Silence, when paired with clarity, is strategy. Harper needed me to verbally validate her decision. She needed social compliance. I gave her none of it. I simply nodded and then walked away. No apology, no consolation, no reassurance. Just the absence of participation. Because that is where social power hides, in what you refuse to perform. The next day, betrayal continued in the smallest details. At the bridal suite styling session, while hair and makeup were being tested for continuity, I sat in a corner seat, simply scrolling through color profiles on my phone, calibrating white balance for a different freelance project. Harper didn't acknowledge me. She treated me as if I was part of the decor, an accessory. I listened, and what I heard confirmed everything. The wedding planner whispered to the photographer, "We need to keep the palette clean, avoid angles where Clara's visible near primary shot composition." Like I was visual noise. Like I was a glitch. Like I had to be actively edited out of moments I was biologically part of. One of the assistants, maybe she was trying to be kind, leaned toward me and said, "Don't take it personally. Aesthetics are business now." I looked at her the way scientists look at petri dishes, detached. Because this wasn't about me being unphotogenic. This was about my sister believing I was disposable to her visual narrative. And betrayal isn't when someone hurts you. Betrayal is when someone decides you're optional. That was the exact second I understood. They didn't want a family photo. They wanted a sponsored advertisement disguised as family. Later that afternoon, I overheard Harper rehearsing her brand partnership talking points for the wedding. She said, out loud, "If the sisterhood visuals land strong, we can double our post-wedding brand collaborations Q1. Our ROI could be insane." My name, my body, my presence was a variable in her marketing deck. Her wedding day was an influencer pipeline, not a moment of love, not a union, a content asset. And I, biologically her sister, wasn't on brand. But the final fracture, the definitive betrayal, came the night before the ceremony. We were at the reception hall again, finishing place card setups. Harper approached me, quietly, this time without audience, which is always how the worst cruelty travels, privately. She said, "I appreciate your maturity about this, Clara. Not everyone can handle not being visually prioritized. I'm proud of you for understanding. Tomorrow is important." I blinked once. She continued, "I'll have Meredith seat you closer to the back, just so that cameras don't catch any misalignment. You understand." That was the moment she confirmed, in explicit language, that she intended to physically reposition me out of frame, not just out of the bridal party, out of the event. I remember my lungs tightening, not in pain, but in recognition. Because she wasn't just managing aesthetics. She was attempting erasure. And the most disturbing part was, she genuinely believed she was being polite. That is the real anatomy of betrayal. It's not shouting. It's not slam doors. It's when someone believes their cruelty is justified. So, I did what I always do. I recorded it. Voice memo. Clear, unemotional, perfect phrasing. I time-stamped her exact wording. And when she finished, she smiled and hugged me lightly, as if she was praising a pet that behaved well. That touch, that patronizing gesture, was the final frame. She didn't simply exclude me, she monetized that exclusion and expected gratitude. By the end of the night, my betrayal wasn't shock, it was clarity. Clarity is what frees you. Because when someone shows you who they are, without disguise, your moral dilemma dissolves. And all that remains is alignment. I finally understood. They never wanted a sister. They wanted a prop. And I finally had no interest in standing still long enough to be used as one.
Discovery isn't always dramatic. Most of the time, it's quiet, incremental, like a drawer that you only realize is crooked after years of opening it without seeing the tilt. For me, discovery wasn't a single twist. It was noticing patterns, and then understanding that those patterns were not random. After Harper's polite exile, I began pulling back from the emotional noise of family gatherings. I didn't avoid them. I observed them differently. Silent, present, not reactive. I went from participant to archivist, and that shift changed everything. The discovery phase truly began 2 days before the wedding, when I accidentally saw Harper's partner deck for the sponsorship. She left her laptop open in the bridal suite while she stepped out to take a call. I didn't touch anything. I didn't snoop. I simply saw the preview thumbnails on her screen. Rows of image mock-ups, sample shots, projected framing, and right there, in the line labeled Family Portrait Variation A, Symmetry Optimized, my position was literally grayed out. A physical placeholder silhouette, a ghost box. Harper had visually removed me before she even had to remove me in real life. It wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was premeditated. They didn't adapt me out. They planned me out. And that realization shifted everything about how I processed the event. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was about resource allocation, brand placements, visual real estate, data performance. I wasn't a sister. I was noise in her KPI. Other clues appeared like loose pixels resolving into sharp focus. For example, during the food tasting, when I casually mentioned that I was going to wear soft taupe satin to avoid color clashing, the planner nodded enthusiastically, almost too enthusiastically. Later, it clicked. Taupe blends into the background on the venue's wood floor. They wanted me invisible. I wasn't just excluded from bridesmaid framing, they were engineering a color-based disappearance. Then another detail. At one point, the photographer's assistant asked Harper, "Will your sister be in the hair and makeup timeline schedule?" And Harper replied, lightly, almost jokingly, "She's more low maintenance. She can just sit wherever." Wherever. No seat assignment. No timeline. No place. Family members with roles have designated cues. Props do not. Everything kept pointing to the same unspoken conclusion. Harper wasn't erasing my presence. She was erasing my positioning. In brand imagery, that's more brutal than removal, because complete absence can be explained away, but invisible presence is a different kind of violation. It signals you existed, but didn't matter. The true crystallization moment, the moment where discovery became certainty, was when I overheard Harper bragging to her maid of honor, "I swear, keeping Clara out of the shots was the smartest call we made. The mood board finally aligns. The brand is finally consistent." The brand. Not the family. Not the memory. Not the moment. The brand. That word echoed inside me, because in my world, brand is a measurable currency. Brand is a data set. Brand is a product. And if Harper positioned her wedding as a brand, then every participant inside it was an asset or a liability. Discovery. I was a liability. Not because I did anything, but because I didn't fit her algorithm of aspirational optics. And here is the quiet horror of
The plan wasn't born from anger. That's important to understand. Anger is loud. Anger is sloppy. Anger gets caught. I needed precision. I needed evidence. I needed mechanics. Because if Harper's wedding was a brand event, then her reputation was the leverage. Brand sponsorship deals aren't emotional, they're contractual. And contracts can collapse under documented incongruence. So I built this like a case file, not revenge, a correction of record. Step 1 was categorization. I created a folder structure on my laptop, named neutrally, nothing dramatic, HB Event Image Analysis. Inside it, I created 6 subfolders: raw audio, transcribed quotes, witness adjacency, marketing deck references, color palette manipulation, pre-wedding positioning notes. This wasn't a revenge folder. It was a data framework. I approached it like a professional, like I would a brand anomaly at work. Because what they did to me was an anomaly. And anomalies leave traces. Evidence isn't emotional, it's structural. Next, I archived all Harper's public wedding sponsorship teasers. The captions, the comments, the mood boards, the Pinterest copy, the hashtags they used strategically. Those hashtags mattered because they told me something important. Harper wasn't just getting paid for aesthetic partnership. She was getting paid for family branding. Her entire pitch to sponsors was built on the concept of authentic sisterhood visuals, and she erased me while simultaneously monetizing me. That is breach territory. Sponsors don't invest in fraud, even emotional fraud. And I didn't have to threaten anyone. I just needed to reveal the inconsistency. If Harper wanted to curate selective reality, she forgot the one thing she should have remembered. I am patient, and I am good with documentation. The plan solidified further when I called someone quietly, the wedding venue's event coordinator, the one who witnessed everything. She didn't like Harper from day one. She saw how staff were treated. She saw how the planner deferred to image over courtesy. She told me, with a casual sigh, that she could confirm timeline reassignments if needed. She had record logs, time-stamped, not to punish Harper, but because venue policy requires modification notes. She didn't realize how powerful that sentence was. Venue policy. Meaning there were metadata traces in professional systems beyond my devices. I didn't need character witnesses. I needed operational verification. Then the most strategic piece of the plan. I didn't go in trying to tear Harper down. I went in simply intending to hold up a mirror. A perfect mirror. One she couldn't edit. When I realized I had enough artifacts, I prepared the payload. It wasn't explosive. It was surgical. A 4-slide email. Not to Harper, not to my mother, not to the family. I sent it directly to the brand partnership manager of the sponsor. Subject line: brand asset integrity. Pre-wedding inquiry. The email didn't narrate, it didn't insult, it didn't accuse. It simply showed, with supporting files, that the visual narrative being sold, authentic sisterhood collective imagery, was knowingly misrepresented. I asked only one question. Does your contractual licensing allow compensated removal of biological family members for commercial aesthetics? That's it. That one line was the scalpel. Because brands aren't loyal to people.
They are loyal to risk mitigation, and risk is defined by evidence. Then, the most emotionally powerful part of my plan, I quietly stepped back. I didn't argue, I didn't hint, I didn't warn. I positioned myself in silence because silence, when you hold evidence, is dominance. Harper had no idea the brand manager was reading those materials. She continued with her planning. She rehearsed her vows. She triple-checked centerpiece symmetry. She told the photographer to test overhead shots. But somewhere in that timeline, her phone buzzed, and she froze. Because she didn't receive a text. She received a contract integrity review inquiry. That is the exact moment the balance shifted. Short beat. Revenge isn't the moment you strike. Revenge is the moment they realize you aren't cornered. Now, I want to be clear about motive. I didn't do this to humiliate her. I did it to reveal her. Authentically. Because she sold a brand built on sisterhood. She shouldn't delete a sister. If she marketed family authenticity, she shouldn't amputate family for palette symmetry. If she claimed inclusive feminine narrative, she shouldn't exclude real women who don't fit her preset. This plan wasn't destruction. It was symmetry. And correction done calmly is the most powerful form of justice. When the sponsor paused their delivery,
Revenge wasn't the blow. Revenge was the timing. Revenge was letting her own structure collapse in her own hands, while I remained still. Because the most devastating revenge is when they realize they authored their own downfall and you only held a mirror. It started 48 hours after the sponsor emailed her. She didn't tell anybody what was happening yet, not because she was being strategic, but because she needed time to rewrite her narrative. Harper always needed to rewrite the narrative first. She needed control of the version. She needed pre-spin. But brands aren't friends. Brands aren't parents. Brands don't soothe. Brands ask for proof. And when the sponsor asked why a direct biological sibling was excluded from the wedding party, despite the campaign being based on sisterhood, she couldn't provide a clean answer. She could have been honest. She could have said, "I chose aesthetics over family. I made a choice." But that would have forced her to admit I existed. So she panicked. She tried to call me. 13 missed calls on my phone. I ignored all of them. There is no music more stressful to a narcissist than the sound of a phone call that is not picked up. Nothing destroys curated control faster. Then she moved to the group text, our family group chat. She typed, "There has been a misunderstanding. Clara is included." Laughable. Mother responded with a heart emoji and a relieved prayer gif. Dad sent a thumbs up. They all thought she was being gracious. But here's the critical piece. Sponsors can see active adjustments. Her timeline modification requests were metadata stamped. The brand manager forwarded me their latest notice. For documentation purposes, your sister attempted to retroactively reinsert you into the bridal party to match her original contract claims. Retroactive inclusion. In corporate brand language, that is an admission of misrepresentation. I didn't have to do anything now. The dominoes were self-falling. The final 2 days before the wedding, the sponsor froze payout. The venue coordinator quietly emailed me, saying brand inquiry response logs were now attached to the wedding file record. In other words, my evidence entered official systems, not as drama, not as gossip, as compliance artifacts. And that is the kind of revenge no family narcissist recovers from gracefully. The morning of the wedding, Harper didn't cry with joy while getting her makeup done. She cried out of anger. Anger because she had to tell the wedding videographer, please don't emphasize the family groupings, just focus on the aesthetic shots. Translation, do not capture the lie in high resolution. And when she pulled me aside, finally, minutes before ceremony lineup, her voice wasn't victorious. Her voice was trembling. She said, Clara, you could have talked to me. And all I replied calmly was, you never talked, you executed. Then I walked away. I didn't raise volume, I didn't shake. Composure is revenge, because composure communicates the one message narcissists cannot tolerate. I don't need you emotionally to exist. And then the most cinematic part. While vows were being recited, the sponsor's legal rep emailed her again, mid-ceremony. Phones were on silent, but notifications still glow on lock screens. Her maid of honor saw the preview bar light up. She read it accidentally. Her face went white. So white that even the photographer paused, noticed. Documented. Revenge captured itself. After the ceremony, after the staged slow-motion recessional, I didn't join the photo line. I sat at a cocktail table, alone, and smiled. Not a cruel smile, not a vengeful smile, a knowing smile. Because I knew right now she finally understood the power of the sister she discarded. Evidence over emotion. Documentation over yelling. Precision over begging. I didn't break her life, I broke her illusion. That's the higher form. Later, when the family realized something was wrong, they tried to ask me, what exactly did you do? And I said the most truthful sentence of my life. I only told the truth to the people who needed the truth. I didn't sabotage. I revealed. I didn't destroy. I unedited. I didn't manipulate. I reported. Revenge wasn't loud. Revenge was ethical. Revenge was professional. It's poetic that the same skill Harper mocked, my data mined, became the instrument that prevented her from profiting off a false sisterhood she denied in real life. Because here's the reality. You cannot call something family branding if you delete family to protect the palate. And you cannot call something authentic femininity if you amputate women who don't fit your template. Harper didn't lose a sponsorship because I attacked. Harper lost her sponsorship because she lied. All I did was show the evidence to the people who were paying to hear the truth. Peace did not arrive like a thunderclap. It arrived like a soft correction of air, like an exhale I had been holding since childhood. The week after the wedding felt strangely clean, not triumphant, not gloating, just precise. I woke up earlier, made coffee slower, sat on my balcony in the mornings without checking who had posted what. The world became quieter because I no longer needed to measure
my existence in comparison to hers. The story had closed without theatrics. The truth stood. That was enough. It's ironic. It wasn't her losing a sponsorship that healed me. It was the fact that she had to sit inside reality without rearranging it. She finally had to live in the world the same way the rest of us do, without a filter to distort outcomes. And that was the justice I needed. A simple redistribution of gravity. She wasn't destroyed. She just wasn't protected anymore. My therapist once told me, revenge isn't payback, it's boundary. That line has lived in me ever since. My revenge wasn't a weapon. It was a correction to the narrative. And now when people ask if I regret sending those emails, if I regret refusing to edit myself back into her fantasy, I don't hesitate. I tell them I regret all the years I waited for someone else to acknowledge my value first. That was the real imprisonment. Waiting for permission. Waiting for validation. Waiting for inclusion from someone who was never going to offer it without conditions. Now I know better. I include myself. We don't always get apologies in this life. We don't get neat reconciliations with ribbons and closure speeches. Sometimes the closure is simply understanding. I was never the problem. Sometimes the closure is knowing they were threatened by the story I carry, not the aesthetics I wear. I am not angry anymore. I'm free. I walk differently now. I speak without shrinking. I show up without asking who needs to approve my lighting. And in the quiet moments when I remember those hotel hallway lights reflecting off my phone the night she said I wasn't aesthetic enough, I only think one thought. That was the last day anyone else curated my identity. My name is Clara Wells, and this was how I used revenge as my weapon. This was another story from Revenge Bible, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Subscribe and join us for the next transformation.